to talk about remembering, but we're going to talk about being forgetful. The story is told of three elderly sisters and their last years, and they lived together in a shared home, a family home. One day, sister number one stopped midway on a staircase and asked one of her sisters, "Was I going up or coming down?" Sister two shook her head and told her, You were going upstairs to go to bed." And then sister two walked into the kitchen. She stopped and looked around for a while, and then she asked sister number three, "What was it I came in here for?" Sister three shook her head and said, "You came in here to make yourself a sandwich. Honestly, I don't know what would happen if the two of you, if I wasn't here to help you and take care of you. I hope I never become as forgetful as the two of you." Then, to give emphasis to her statement, she knocked on the wood of the kitchen table. Then, hearing the knocking sound, she immediately went to the front door and opened it up to see who was knocking at the door. You know, we laugh at that a little bit, but some of us are relating to that more and more. But, you know, too many times we forget to remember as well, don't we? Today should not be one of those days. There are important things that we are deliberately choosing to remember today. The poem penned by Moina Michael some years ago states this: "We cherish today the poppy red that grows on fields where valor led. It leads to signal to the skies that the blood of heroes never died." Today we pause to remember and give tribute to the sacrifice of those who laid down their lives on battlefields on our behalf. John 15:3 says, "No greater love has any man than to lay down his life for his friends." And that's exactly what those we give tribute to today did. They laid their lives down for the nation, for their friends. And it was a costly sacrifice. So today, we want to specifically give tribute to the choices made and the tasks that were performed. And the first we realize is that they wore the uniform. Those of you who ever been around and about, there was a time back in the earlier days that they had to wear that uniform. You know, you rarely saw them in civilian clothes. And they could have refused to serve, but they didn't. You know, up until 1971, every young man after he turned 18 years old was aware there was a chance that he might receive a letter in the mail. An official greetings letter from Uncle Sam, informing them that they had been selected to serve in the U.S. Army or the military. And there were many who refused to serve. Some ran away to Canada, some burned their draft cards in protest, and others simply tried to hide out and hope that they wouldn't be found. But those that we give tribute to today chose to stand up and put on the uniform and serve their country. Whether they were drafted or enlisted, they chose to follow through and put on the uniform, and for that choice we give them tribute today. They wore the uniform to represent their country and be identified as an American. They set aside, if you will, their more fashionable civilian clothes with lots of variety, and they willingly chose to limit their wardrobe to only that which was issued to them. A wardrobe with very few colors and a very limited number of acceptable styles and combinations. They wore the uniform to be unashamedly identified as being a member of one of the branches of our armed services, if you will, one of the good guys, a member of a band of brothers committed to serving for the welfare of America. They wore the uniform to leave no doubt whose side that they were on. A story was told about a young man during the Civil War years here in America who had two brothers, one who fought in the Union Army and the other that fought as a Confederate. And one day the young man went to a nearby town in Kentucky when he thought both of the brothers' companies might be coming close by. And so he chose not to declare an affiliation with either of the armies. So he wore the gray pants of the Confederates and a blue coat of the Union Army. He was found the next morning, dead under an old tree. He had been shot by both armies. He wouldn't decide which side he was on. But the men that we and women that we honor today, they chose to be on that side. We also give tribute to them because they moved into harm's way. When the battle began, they could have run away. They could have deserted. They could have chosen to think only of themselves, but they didn't. Years ago, a shipwrecked off the New England coast. A young member of the Coast Guard rescue crew said to his captain, "We can't go out. We'll never get back." But the grizzled old captain, he was a lifelong military man, replied to the young man, "No, we don't have to come back, but we do have to go out." You see, knowing the risk those we give tribute to today didn't cower from the task. They engaged in the battle, and in doing so, they paid the ultimate price. They gave of their own lives. They were willing to move into harm's way so that we might be free. We also give tribute because they remained faithful to the finish. They were close enough to be in range of the enemy's weapons, maybe even close enough to look the enemy in the face, but they kept on fighting. Many even charged the enemy. Some attracted the enemy's attention to divert fire from their comrades, their friends in arms. And the point is this: even in the face of death, they served faithfully on our behalf. And so we give tribute and honor today because they remained faithful to the finish. We also pay tribute because they died so that others could be free. Their sacrifice enables you and I as Americans to be free to enjoy our lives to the fullest. Father Dennis Edward O'Brien, United States Marine Corps, says it well. He says, "It is the soldier, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the soldier, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the soldier, not the campus organizer, who has given us the freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier who salutes the flag, who serves beneath the flag, and whose coffin is draped by the flag, who allows the protester to burn the flag." You see, their sacrifice enables us to be free to worship without interference. They might have been lured into service by the idea that they could, remember the slogan, be all you can be in the Army. But they died so that we could become all that we can be in our lives, our jobs, our families, our relationships. As we come to this Memorial Day, we are reminded that they died so that you and I could be free. And I urge you to join me in spending a moment to thank God for those who went ahead of us and who paid the ultimate price of their lives in order that we might enjoy our freedom. Certainly, gratitude is appropriate for Memorial Day. And hopefully we will be grateful as we eat our hot dogs and we eat that cheeseburger. You know, every Friday night until his death in 1973, an elderly man walked slowly and slightly stooped down an old broken pier on the eastern seacoast of Florida. Each Friday he would carry a bucket of shrimp. And the seagulls would flock to the old man and he would feed them from his bucket. Why, you might ask? Well, that's what Paul Harvey did call the rest of the story, by the way. The man's name was Eddie Rickenbacker. And some of you are old enough to recognize that name. But Eddie Rickenbacker is a famous hero of World War II. but his life was forever changed in October of 1942 when he was on a mission in his B-17 to deliver a very important message to General Douglas MacArthur in New Guinea. However, somewhere over the South Pacific, the Flying Fortress, as it was known, became lost beyond the reach of radio. Fuel ran dangerously low, and the crew eventually had to ditch the plane into the ocean. And for more than a month, Rickenbacker and his fellow crew members fought the water, the weather, and the scorching sun. They also spent many sleepless nights as giant sharks rammed their two rafts. The largest raft they had was only 9 feet by 5 feet. And some of the sharks, he noted, were more than 10 feet long. But all other enemies that they had out there, one proved the most formidable, and that was starvation. 8 days out, and their rations were long gone and destroyed by the salt water there. And they prayed for a miracle to sustain them. They gathered their rafts together for a worship service. In Rickenbacker's own words, he says, Cherry, who was the B-17 pilot, Captain William Cherry, read the service that afternoon, and we finished with a prayer for deliverance and a prayer or a hymn of praise. There was some talk afterwards, but he says it tapered off in the oppressive heat. With my hat, he says, pulled over my eyes to keep out the glare, I dozed off. And he says, but something landed on my head. He says, I knew it was a seagull, even though I couldn't see. Everyone else knew it too. No one said a word, but peering out from under my hat brim without moving my head, I could see the expression on their faces. They were staring at that gull. You see, that gull meant food. If I could catch it, well, the rest, as they say, is history. Rickenbacker did catch the gull. The flesh was eaten, and its intestines were used as bait to catch fish. And they survived for more than a month before being rescued. And their hopes were kept fresh because of a lone seagull. Get the idea of the tale now? The seagull was uncharacteristically hundreds of miles away from land, and yet there it was, offering itself as a sacrifice. But now you know why Eddie Rickenbacker, as an older man, white-haired, would move much more slowly, made his every Friday walk down the pier to feed the seagulls. He did it in remembrance of that lone seagull who one day, long ago, gave itself up, like manna in the wilderness, like Jesus, if you will, on the cross. Earlier here, we came around the table to remember. And it's a remembrance that Jesus requested us to engage in the Lord's Supper. And it's important for us to pause as we remember. We remember our fallen heroes, but we also need to remember the sacrifices that Jesus made on our behalf. If you will, he too wore a uniform, if you will. John 1:14 said, the Word became flesh and dwelt among